recordings on. I need to mute everybody, excuse me, but there you go, you're all muted. And so a very, very, very warm welcome to all of you here just now online, and to all of those who are watching the Zooms. Apologies to anybody who missed the Zooms because our number of people registered went over the 100 limit. So if the YouTube's almost as good. It's quite nice to be live, but the YouTube's almost as good. If you are watching on YouTube, there are 3 support documents. One of them, very important, because everything, all the actual information and steps of practice in this course, they're in that document. So some things will be more thorough in the document than actually in the live teaching, because I prefer in the live teaching to spend time with what's most important. Knowing that you've got that document. Just a second, there is somebody. Katie, can you try and help Linda? She's using the meeting ID and she's using the password, but it's still not working. I think Zoom has actually kind of closed this meeting down now, but maybe it can't work for her. It's the first time this has happened. So anyway, yeah, very warm welcome. So let's start in the very, very, very best way with an excellent motivation and kind heart, a big mind, including everyone, with 2 especiallys. One, especially all those people who are part of this life that we are now reviewing and saying goodbye to. They're very important, not just in our karma, they're important in our mind because they are part of our psychology, part of our history. And so we include them. And then we include especially all of those who are dying just now. And we hope that what we're doing here somehow will connect and help them, support them one way or another through our own loving care and awareness of all of those every day, every hour, who are saying goodbye to this life. So let's try to love everyone from the depths of our being and think we are receiving these teachings for their benefit. Sonje chodon soji chonamla chancho bandon dane chapsanche tagi jinso jipe sanomje rola penchira sonje drop parasho sonje chodon soji chonamla chancho bandon dane chapsanche tagi jinso jipe sanomje rola penchira sonje drop parasho Sonje chodon soji chonamla chancho badon dane chapsanche tagi jinso jipe sanomje drola penchira sonje drup parasho semchen tamche dewa dang dewe jodang den parachoche dongal dang dongal je jodang shalwar choche Dongal mepe dewa dang padang ben shalwar choche Yerin chatan netang shalwe tanyom chempola ne paranjorche Te yadha shamne shamawati shameta shacho mam kore marazite Karota ke yorita jovati ola yani bishuda ne malapa Naye kukure kaka grasana muki para muki amuki sham tani sawa graha bandhanane kriyeta sawa prava dina vimukta mara pasha sata pita buddha mudra Anugatita savamare butsarita parishuddha prikasantu savamara kama. Palen Sawel Amar Rinpoche Dage Chewara Pende Denshola Kadren Chempo Gone Jizonte Kuson Toche Ngadrop Saldo. Thank you very, very much. So now, let me see. Just a moment, I need to see if I can help somebody. Okay, so now to recapitulate, sort of, last week, then, because it's very important, but we've got a lot to do today, so we can't spend too much time. What we are dealing with, dying as best we can, is not what we think of when we think of the word dying, of somebody in their last moments, somebody sick, pale, in a hospital, whatever it is. Of course, that will happen. And then in next week's talk, we'll be looking at that part in detail. But mainly we're looking at leaving this life gracefully, happily, peacefully, as best as we can, as best as we can. And so that involves two main steps. One is closing off, sealing off this life, freeing ourselves from it. So we're ready for part two, which is preparing our mind to move into the vast future that we will be entering, like it or not. So because that's going to happen, and because it's very important, because it's all your futures, all your future lives, then we need to prepare as best we can. This is very important. These words, as best I can, as best we can, very important before we go. So last week I made the analogy, and I'd like to come back to it in two different ways today, about me in my travels. For instance, I used to go for a couple of months each year to Africa, Southern Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Congo. So it was a trip, 2.5 months traveling around. And it started with a night flight. So you're up there in space in the dark with all the stars, the vastness. And then gradually you come into land. And not only do you come into land in your body, but your actual reality for the next couple of months is going to be those people, the friends I hadn't seen for a year, the situation in this Dharma center, that Dharma center, the Johannesburg vibe, the Cape Town vibe, the Zimbabwe vibe, the people, their problems, their joys. You're kind of plunged into that. And of course, your mind's busy with it. I have to teach, help people personally. It's a whole Southern African reality. But then comes the time at the end when you're packing your bags and you're moving on. And in 1 year, it was a big move on because the next set of gigs was Northern Europe, Russia, Finland, northern countries, so different. So you need to kind of seal off where you've been and prepare yourself for what's coming next. And then you're in that aeroplane, and it's an amazing thing because you see the city you've just left getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And there you are back in the big space again, ready to go somewhere else. Excuse me. So this is what we are preparing for. Now, we want to do this. We'll go through the technical, how can you say, the teachings, the technical details, but there is a flavor to it. There's a tone to it, that all of those details should be helping us to set. We want to do this gracefully, beautifully, with loving care for everything we are, and with loving care for other beings. Not with gritted teeth, not with regrets. We'll come to that next week about regrets for life. But we are learning to care for this mind of ours, which is what goes on. Everything else, everyone else we leave behind. And they'll disappear like last night's dream. They'll disappear like the people of 3 lifetimes ago that you can't even remember. But you go forward. We live with ourselves forever. We can't change minds with somebody else, even for 2 minutes. For all the money in the world, for all the prayers in the world, we are ourselves. It's the Buddha's teaching, karma, reincarnation. It would be endless unless we liberated ourselves. He teaches how that works. There is no lasting self, but this changing story will always be your story, my story. So we need to handle that so nicely now. Whatever happened in this life, now we're on the way out. We're going to take beautiful, beautiful care of our heart and mind and how we do each of these steps that come through the teachings, the great kindness and compassion of Atisha. So we have to do that. And with each step of everything we'll do this week and next week, and in the final week, then we have 2 main supports. One I didn't really touch on much last week. It is the practice of Tonglen. Some of you will be familiar with Tonglen. If any of you aren't and you'd like to learn it, then I'll give you the links for videos of Tonglen training from our Zoom courses that aren't public, but that you're welcome to watch so you can get an intense, it's actually a very deep version of Tonglen. You're very welcome to that. And then for those of you who don't know at all what it is, we'll do a very, very simplified version a little bit today. If you remember from last week, following Atisha's training, we are using 5 powers. And so each of those 5 powers is accompanied by Tonglen. So we'll see what that means later on. It means basically whatever we're doing for ourselves, we are mindful that there are many other people dying just now. And we're longing, if only this present I'm giving myself, if only others could get benefit, if only they could find this wisdom of dealing with your mind as it ends this particular whole life. If only they could find the wisdom and the peace. So it's a question of sharing with everybody. So Tonglen accompanies us through all the 5 main steps. And then one thing that I did introduce last week was the journaling. This review of our life is also very, very helpful. It's helpful in closing the chapter, saying the goodbyes, seeking the forgiveness, expressing the gratitude. But it's also very helpful having had that review, as we'll see next week, to think, excuse me, to think, okay, that was this life. What do I want the next one to be? Really and truly. So we'll see next week the way we review and the way we try and channel all of the power, all of the karma we have, all of the prayers we have, all the intention we have, the way we channel that into a future life where we don't make the same mistakes we made this life, and where we enhance whatever benefits we gained in this life, whatever power, skills, meditation, loving kindness, those we want to make them better. So the journaling will be very, very, very helpful for that. So let's go now, must move on to the first of these powers. And it's called Sowing Positive Seeds. Now, in the backup literature, you'll see in the original teachings of Atisha that this sowing positive seeds has, like all of these 5 powers, how we apply it in life, and then especially how we apply it in death. So normally in life, it means all the good, helpful, kind karmas you make is like sowing seeds in a garden. They'll come up. They'll come up in the future as flowers, as vegetables, as useful, beautiful, nourishing things. And some of the seeds are amazing seeds because they can grow over 200, 300 years into a huge tree. Other seeds might be, they only come up once, but while it lasts, the flower is very pretty. So in our life, we make good karma. And that good karma, the positive seeds, will be our best friend for future lives because it goes with us. Our karma goes with us. The place where we made the karma, the people with whom we made the karma, bye-bye. No choice. Bye-bye for good. We might come back in each other's lives, but it will be so different. You might be your ex's pussycat next time. Who knows? Or they might be yours. There is a story from the scriptures of the great Siddham, Mahakatyayana. And he's turned a corner. He had a lot of clairvoyance. And he just stopped in his tracks. And his jaw dropped. And there are different versions of the story, but basically there's a woman who's nursing with love the child in her arms. And she's just finished eating some fish and she's throwing the bones to a dog. And he sees the reincarnations of all of these. The child she's nursing so lovingly previously was her worst enemy who messed her up, something shocking. And then the fish she just finished eating was somebody else. I forget the details, throwing it to the dog who was somebody else. And he just thought, this is karma. This is the way it works. So the people, the places, all the stuff we leave behind, but our karma goes with us. So the best preparation for dying is what we do lifelong, our goodness, our kindness, our Dharma practice. But then particularly now at the end of life, how can we sow the most positive seeds? And this has got an inner aspect and an outer aspect that I explained a little bit last week. It's mainly through, technically, what we call the practice of generosity. So the outer aspect is very straightforward, and it was much more straightforward in the past, in countries where life was simple, like Tibet. It's, what do you do, at least with what you've got? Your money, your livestock, whatever what people had as wealth. So in Tibet, for instance, the general guideline was 3 parts. One is you give to your family, your children, whatever, like we do normally with inheritance. One part would be for death ceremonies. So the custom was, as much as one could afford, One threw a big feast for everyone. It's a bit like a wake, excuse me, a wake. When somebody dies, you made best food possible, invited people for all the days of the funeral celebrations. But mainly you invited from the monastery monks, and if you can, a High Lama, and they would do days of prayers and rituals, and they bring all the instruments. And so a third of your wealth went into that because people thought that the sending off was very important. Then the remaining third would be donated to Dharma, go to local monasteries or to sponsoring a project, statues, whatever it was. So that's a very external idea of generosity. You give your stuff, and it's what we'll look at first today. But as I mentioned last week, when we look at the Buddha's teachings of what is generosity, it is not what you give. And a rich person doesn't make stronger benefit through giving a lot of money. It's how you give. So a very poor person giving a tiny thing can make much more positive help for themselves, for their karma, than a rich person can, giving a fortune to a charity or whatever it is. The quality of the giving, of course, the love and the care in your heart, but more than anything, and this is the whole point of the paramita of generosity, as we saw, is that you let go. Giving means giving up. And for dying, this is vital. You want to say goodbye to whatever you had until it becomes just like everything else that anybody else ever had. If it's money, if it's property, if it's your garden, if it's treasured objects, you need to see it with that neutrality that you might see the lawnmower of somebody 3 streets away when you drive past in the car. So what? It's just a thing. It's a thing. It's stuff. It's numbers on a bank account. So the letting go means that your mind is no longer tied in to all that stuff. When the image of it, the thought of it appears, nothing happens. There's no worry. There's no concern. There's no feeling of anything. All these little Gulliver strings that tie us down, the giant that we are, to stuff, to property, need to be cut. No doubt about it. But then, as this course says, as best you can. All these things we'll do, the 5 steps, we won't do perfectly. We must be so happy with that. You must be able to say again and again, as death approaches and you're doing these things, I did my best. As Taisittupa says so often, no one can do more than their best. That's what best means. And if you can say, I've done my best, and feel happy about that, it's a very, very vital secret to this whole process. Don't hold up some benchmark, some standard of it ought to have been like this, or Harry down the road did that, whatever it is. That's useless. You do your best and you accept it. Acceptance, so important. So that is the outer aspect of stuff. The inner aspect is we need to let go. So now we're going to see today 3 areas where we need to let go. Always the same. We're letting go of our mind's involvement so we can move on. 3 areas. 1 is stuff, the material world. We need to let go in every way. 2nd is our emotional ties to friends, and families, family, loved ones. And third is we need to let go of this whole life story. In the text, it says your body. But as I said last week, that's shorthand. It means this existence, this whole complicated bundle of karma that you've just gone through and which is ending now. You're like an actor. You've been in this theatre. You've been in what? I won't call it the Scottish play because I'm not an actor who's superstitious. Macbeth. You've been in Macbeth and you're in Scottish costume and you're in that whole world of the politics of the time with the people who are your fellow actors playing their roles in that particular town. But now that's finished. It's time to pack your suitcase. And maybe you're going to play in some super modern drama in a totally different theater with one or two different actors. So that whole new thing starts. What you've been doing day after day, the role you've been playing. You're no longer dressed up in a kilt and armor. You're a traveling salesman in America, or whatever it is. We will go on to a completely new reality. So we need to let go this life story and how much we identify. So let's go through these things today together, step by step, with the traditional advice, but applied to the modern circumstances that we are in. So first, letting go of stuff is you need to make a will. I mean, not necessarily, but it's probably a key. Even if you don't make a real will, maybe you have nobody left. Maybe you have nothing left to give. And maybe you have nobody left to give it to. But if you do, then you make a real or an imaginary will whereby you are letting go all your stuff. If you do have children, then this is a very important time because it can be one of the most worrying things. Who do I give what? And then when I'm gone, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to fight each other? What's the best thing to do? And so on and so on. Now we need to deal with that and go through it as best we can so that at the end we say, enough of that. I don't want to know about stuff anymore. And you tell people if you can, your children, your relatives, I've decided what to do with my stuff. I have more important things for me to do now. And as far as I'm concerned, it's done. I did my best, but I don't really want to hear any more about it. I don't want to think any more about it. So we need to do real work there. Many years ago here in France, I knew the mayor of the next village, who was my mother-in-law's lawyer. A very wise man at the end of his career who'd seen a lot of life. And he said something so true. He said, you know, equitable and fair are not the same things. For instance, if you have 3 children, then equitable means that you give them a third share each. That might seem, well, equitable. But is it fair? That's something completely different. It may be very unfair because maybe one of the children is so poor and the other 2 are so rich. And of course, you care for the one who's poor, you know, the other ones, then they've got that kind of karma, you know, they're always going to land on their feet. But there's the one who isn't the one who you might be able to help. So then it would seem more fair to give more to that person. Or sometimes there's one of the children who's really helped you, especially in your old age, in those later years, not because they're after your money, but because they really wanted to care for you. And you want to reward. You want to show your own gratitude for their closeness and their support. So it would seem natural to be able to help them more. So equitable and fair are not the same thing. But then, as you probably know, it gets more complicated than that, because even though the other siblings might be richer, maybe they didn't help you so much, but they can be so resentful that they didn't get the equitable third share. And then that can cause misery. It's complicated, because the person who needs your help, who can't stand on their own feet so well, is then going to be victimized by the other two who didn't need your stuff anyway in the first place. Because deep inside, there are all of these sibling feelings of he or she loved me more than the other one, and it goes back to childhood. It just gets hellishly complicated. So you need to face this. Whatever there is there to face, you need to give it so much time. You know, you've got three things to let go of: stuff, personal attachments, and your own life story. You've got to do all of that in at least, in at most, half the time you've got between now and when you die. You don't have forever. So you roll up your sleeves and you get down to it. What stuff have I got? What, for me, given all my judgment, equitable, fair, everything I can think of, what's the best I can do with this? And you do it. And especially whatever stuff it is, if you're, however you attach to it, then you let go. It's theirs now. Even if they won't technically get it until you're gone, in your mind, it's theirs now. It's not my business anymore. You know, sometimes when people die, they don't really know they're dead. They're confused. And they can cling so much to objects. They can cling so much to places. It's why we get haunted buildings. We don't want to do that. We need to let go now. See the treasured object we had, whatever it is. The garden you poured years, decades into making so beautiful. Like my mother-in-law, she made such a beautiful garden. Never been able to honor it. It's fallen into ruin. But she was good. She let go before she died. She knew it will go into other hands. So we need to let go. And if you can, then you tell your children what you've done, and you tell them why you've done it, and you say, I don't want to hear any more, but please be kind to each other. Please understand this was my wish. So something like that, I think you'll find in the backup literature. All of those words, and maybe a few more, are explained, but you need to deal with your stuff. So find, when you sit quietly, when you meditate, take a trip through your stuff. Feel your feelings. When you think of some things, you'll find your body kind of changes. You feel tenser. You have those hope and fear energies inside you. So stop there and release them. Let go. That's not my business anymore. Try and see whatever it is. That's somebody else's now. Really and truly. And this can work. And it can work efficiently, and it can work quickly. So that, and you'll surprise yourself. Something you were so attached to, like your garden. Maybe you're not so well. Maybe you're being pushed around your garden now in a wheelchair. But as you look at it, you start seeing it like any other garden, like somebody else's garden. You still love it. You appreciate it. But somehow you've let go. You've moved on. So we do that. You'll know which objects you have much more than, I can't tell you. You know your stuff better. You need to make a will or in your imagination. And if stuff comes up, like one of your children comes to visit you and they're trying to be very delicate and they don't really want to say, actually, Mom, I want that. They're just talking about stuff. And you don't let yourself get pulled back. You don't change your mind. And this could be very helpful too, because sometimes when you're getting near the end, your mind's not strong. You're physically very weak, mentally very weak. That feeling that you've told yourself again and again, no, I finished with that. I've done my best. May be very helpful practically as well. People won't be manipulating you and making you worry in your last weeks and months about stuff. Stuff's just stuff. We must let go. We're going to somewhere amazing. We're going off on a spiritual journey. Beautiful journey into the future. The stuff of this life you're leaving is just chains. It's just chains. It's a prison we need to break free from. So first we need to let go of stuff. Now this is our first training in the letting go. And I hope the first feeling of what it's like to let go. It's like getting out of prison. You realize how all your life you've been worrying about stuff. You've had these tensions with your family and children, all this. Our mind's been locked up and we feel the letting go. That's a training. So now in step 2, and it's easy for me to say, but it's important for all of us to do, we need to let go of our involvement, our attachment, our hopes and fears with our loved ones, until we can see them, not with less love, but with eyes that love everybody as much as we love them. That's where we're going in future lives, to a heart that's open and there and loving for everybody. So it doesn't mean when we say stop the attachment to our loved ones that we have to turn off our love. What we have to do is make our love pure. Take away the attachment, keep the love, make the love pure. We see them in the way the Buddha teaches us who they are. Just now, maybe it's your son, your daughter, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your best friend. But in past lives, we've been this and that, so many lifetimes together. We see them in that perspective. And then in the future, we'll be so different, embodied differently, in relationships which are different, until in the end, we are all liberated. So we get that perspective. We free our mind from all the hopes and fears and the complexity of bringing up a child, from living with a partner, from having a friendship with whatever it is, loved ones. We need to free our mind from all the attachment. And it's the same thing. When you think of them, you'll feel your energies, you'll feel all the complexity. And we let them go like birds flying in the sky. So I'd like to share with you, because this is serious, it's very important. It's serious stuff. One of the most beautiful memories in my life. I'd driven overnight, this is 1970, from Kabul up, following a long river valley, to Mazar-i-Sharif in the north of Afghanistan. It was an overnight drive. I don't know if that was very wise, but it was. And already on an overnight drive in Afghanistan, I'd been held up at gunpoint, but anyway, that's another story. So it was an overnight drive, arriving in Mazar-e Sharif at dawn. In Mazar-e Sharif, there's the most beautiful white marble mosque. And there's a huge rose garden around it that's full of white doves. So the vehicle arriving at dawn early in the morning, it made about 200 white doves fly off from the roses in full bloom around these white minarets up into this clear blue rainbow sky of dawn. It was like, and then to crown that, the local man plucked one of the roses from the garden and came up with a huge smile in his eyes, and he said, "Welcome to Mazar-e Sharif." So that's a lovely memory, and I can still see those doves flying up. Our attachments have the joy. Don't fight it. Find the beauty of letting them go. Letting them go. When you think of your son and your daughter, see them with all the love in the world that you know you should feel for everybody. But the tensions, the hopes, the fears, the attachments, what will become of them? How will they think of me? Bye-bye. 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 Do as best you can, and you'll need to do this again and again. And there is one enormous favor, gift you can give them in your dying. You can set an example of somebody dying well and at peace. And through all their life, they'll remember the way Mum was in her last weeks, her last months. And you can tell them if they come and see you, you take their hand and you look at them, where you feel with all the love, but with something special inside you already, that twinkle in your eye. And you tell them, "Darling, I love you very much, but you'll understand now. I'm about to go off on a most amazing journey. I'll always love you, but I need to find peace within myself. So if I seem not the same as before, please understand it's because for you and everybody, I want to die well and at peace inside myself." Something like that. You'll find your own words. Speak honestly. Don't invent words if you don't feel at peace. Don't try and pretend you're at peace. But whatever you're doing through this work, you don't need to hide it, and you need to differentiate clearly between love. We can never love anybody enough, but love and attachment, an attachment which shows itself by hope and fear. You're invested in their responses. They mean a lot to you. We're finished with that for this life. Other people's feedback is not going to make our heart and mind go up and down. We're going to find an inner beauty. So you need to work with that as best you can. In real life meetings with people, you can write letters, you can do it over Zoom, whatever it is, but we need to let go of the attachment we have to people. And the test for that, you won't do it perfectly, but you'll do it as best you can. The test is when you start to feel a more universal love. So you see, yes, this person was my husband, my wife, my son, my daughter just now. But you see them in that huge perspective. And you realize that the next door neighbor is starting to feel the same. That's another human being who maybe your son or daughter next time round. I can't really describe it, but if you do this work, you'll feel it. How beautiful pure love is, and how it extends out to everybody, and how it's free of the worry and anxiety and expectation and hope that we invest normally in what we call our loved ones. So we need to work on that, give it good time, do it as we meditate, and then see how what we've worked out in our meditation, our quiet time, how that pans out in the reality of actually talking on the phone, people coming to visit you, whatever it is. It's a work in progress. But again, we need to not carry on doing that until our very last breath. We're making this imaginary deadline of telling yourself, I've got about a month or 3 months to do my best, but then afterwards I need to say, I've done my best. And now there's another stage of what I need to do. I can't afford any more time. So we won't do it perfectly, but we'll do our best. And we'll be very, very happy with our best. Doing your best means accepting how people react to you, your loved ones. It may be fine. It may be very complicated and unpleasant. That's life. That's life. That's life. You're going. They're staying. That's their problem now. It's not yours anymore. So I hope that makes some sense. And now we come to the third thing, which at first, when you read the description in many of the texts, might not seem the biggest thing. Okay, you've let go your stuff as best you can. You've let go your emotional attachments as best you can. And so now it says, leaving this life. And often it says this body. And some of the texts are written in a very simplistic way. It says this body you've been so attached to. I mean, by the time you get to the end of your days, you might be really sick and fed up with this body because it's hurt so much. It's let you down so much. Doesn't look so good, doesn't feel so good. And it's just going to get worse. Probably. So you might think, especially if you believe in reincarnation, okay, it's like when your phone contract comes to an end. I'm going to get a new phone. I'm going to get a new body. But it's not about the body and getting a new body. It's about letting go this life. And this is the point. It's the heart of the Buddha's teaching. All these teachings about ego. Now, the key word here is identity. You identify with your story. So even if your story is wretched, even if you've been a victim, sometimes, nevertheless, identifying yourself as a victim, carrying yourself through life as a victim has become your identity. If you've been a success, carrying yourself as a success. I've known a few people in politics. They vary quite a bit, but some of them, it's when they walk through their town or their city, everyone knows who they are if they've been elected. And so they kind of, good morning. Yeah. Hello, Mr. Smith, how are you? They've got that kind of politician's smoothness with everybody. That's their identity. Some people identified as scholars. And it's always shocked me. I'm identified by people as a scholar very often. Ken the translator. I'm a lousy translator. There was nobody else at the time, so I translated important works, but I've seen people who are so much better. I'd never identify myself as a translator. And scholars, some people have got the most brilliant brains. I know a lot, but I know how little it is compared with some, and so on. So how I identify myself is not how other people identify me. So it's a question of identity. Maybe we've identified ourselves as a father, a mother, whatever it is. Identity, getting stuck in identity, being scared of what will it be if I drop this identity, is at the heart of all the Dharma teachings. And this is where it gets interesting, because now we're coming to the end of our life and preparing for this amazing set of events and opportunities which awaits us at death and after death. Then the ability to let go, that identifying with our story, is absolutely at the heart of Dharma practice. This is why we are journaling, because we want to get already a bit of distance from our story. Not I am, and then going through it in the I am mode, but now I'm waking up. This inevitable, unwished for fact of dying can be the great blessing of waking up to what the Buddha's always told us. So me, the waking up person. Oh, sorry, I got a story. It's a very brief story, but my teacher was Akon Rinpoche. Still is, but he's dead. Sometimes I was his main assistant. Sometimes my friend Gelong Thupten was his main assistant. So a few years before he died, about 2 years before Akon Rinpoche died, he was asked to go to a place, I think, of palliative care, to talk to the people. So everyone there was at the end of their journey. And Thupten said, so he was sat on the chair. I was on a chair at the front, but to the side. And he said, when I heard his first words, he said, I thought, oh no, Rinpoche, don't say that. He was absolutely, I've been in that situation where you think, oh no, what's coming next? These aren't the words you say to those kind of people. So his first words were, you are the luckiest people in the world. You are the luckiest people in the world. And then he explained why. It's because everyone, we're all dying. Everyone in life is dying. People with simplistic philosophy might say, from the day you're born, you're dying. In tantric teachings, it's much more interesting. And these days, in terms of biology and brain biology and all the rest, it's just amazingly accurate. It says, actually, from the time of conception up to the time you're about 20, 21, then what it calls all your subtle energy channels, 72,000 of them, main ones, which especially corresponds to the brain development. They're still growing and forming, and you're in health. But from the age of 21 until whatever time you die, then you don't get new ones. They die off. And we know this is true now for neurons and things like this. But anyway, everyone's dying, but people have this phobia of thinking about death, so we act as though it doesn't happen. We act as though we're immortal. When somebody dies, we treat it as a tragedy, which it is, relatively, of course. But it happens to us all. So he was saying, you're so lucky, because you know you don't have long. So this gives you the time to really look after your heart. So we need to let go the story of this life. Now, what are we going to do? We saw last week, we are going to journal. We're going to travel back through this life and not get stuck. We're going to give ourselves a time frame, however many years it is, and given whatever time we feel we've got to do it, we will work back systematically, leave lots of spaces so we can add stuff when it comes along. But the important moments of your life, good or bad, we won't get stuck in them. We won't ignore them either, but we won't get stuck in them because we want to go back to the beginning of the story and then work our way back from the beginning up into the present day, as we saw last week. Forgiving those who hurt us, asking for forgiveness from those we hurt, feeling immense gratitude to those who helped us on our way, and rejoicing in the goodness of being able to help others on their way. All of this with the sole perspective of freeing our mind, snipping the strings, so that as we move on, our mind is not held back. We did our best, but that story is over. So we are journaling, but the way we are journaling, now this will vary because I know on this course and in the YouTubes as well, not everyone is a practicing Buddhist or a Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhist. But the way we are doing that journaling is entrusting ourselves to our refuges. So it's easy if you're a Buddhist. It's the Buddha, the Dharma, the universal truth, and the Bodhisattva Sangha who are there. So there, even if we can't see them and feel them at first. So as we entrust ourselves to these sources of help, which will be there as you die, in between this life and the next life in the bardos, that will be there all through your next life and other lives, those changeless, trustworthy, pure refuges will always be there. So we are entrusting ourselves more and more to them as we journal our way through this life, month by month, year by year, and then we work backwards in the process of forgiving, rejoicing, releasing. Forgiving, rejoicing, releasing. So we say, I did my best. You'll never do it perfectly. Powerful things from your childhood, maybe difficult things, traumatic things. Wonderful moments of a life that as you go back, all of a sudden, they live again. The absolute beauty of friendship, of love, and so on. You're never totally freed, but you'll do your best so you can say, enough of that. Enough now. That was that life. Need to be able to close the door. So we are journaling, and at the same time, we are entrusting ourselves. Now, if you're a Christian, then you'll be entrusting yourself to God or to Jesus and whatever your faith is. At this point, we need to draw on our deepest roots of belief, let's say, trust. My own teachers and in public, His Holiness Dalai Lama and other people have often said to people, send people back to their own religious roots. He said, you've learned from Buddhism, you've learned to meditate, you've learned a lot of interesting, true things about life. But they recognize deep inside you, you're Jewish. Deep inside you, you feel the love of Jesus. And that deep inside you, place you turn to in your moments of need is very, very, very important. Now, whichever faith you have, you might find as the reality of death approaches, is not what you thought it was. And you might not feel as strong as you thought you would feel, and your belief won't be as rock solid as you maybe at one time believed it would be. I knew somebody who lived to a very, very good old age, who always said, oh, when I die, I'll be so happy to go back into the arms of Jesus. I mean, really, like simple as that and as beautiful. Endless love of Jesus that have been prayed to, imagined day after day, day after day. I really personally could believe. But then actually in the last months, if anybody reminded her of that, saying, well, when the time comes, Jesus will be there, she'd just look sort of, well. But in the end, fortunately, it came back. I can't tell you convincingly enough. I can only tell you what all my teachers teach me, but I believe absolutely, and according to my own experience, is so true. The presence of what we might call our gurus in Buddhism, or the presence of the timeless Buddha mind, so perfect, so pure, so loving. If people give it another name and call it God, or the universe, a kind universe, or Jesus, doesn't matter. Whatever we call it, it really is there. It's there right now. It always has been. So this approach to death is our time, wonderful time, to open ourselves completely to that. To accept, this story is over. Story of Ken. That's it. That was the story of Ken. That's over. But now, something so much faster. Something for everybody throughout all existence. Where all my lives have been heading, that's opening up now. So we learn to feel very happy. Acceptance. Accepting that into our heart. Accepting that, yes, this story is over. So as we do the journaling more and more, it may seem very strange. It's like writing somebody else's life story. That's a great feeling. It means that it's not me and my story and I did this. I'm sorry for my silly examples. Just a moment, need a bit of coffee. There's something that makes me cringe, but it's quite funny at the same time. Growing up's a strange thing. We go through different stages when we're little kids, bigger kids, and then when we're kids with a bit of freedom. At the end of our high school, maybe early college years. So when people start, and then after that, sometimes that's when you get tied down. Of course, you have to work for a living, and then you get married, then you have children, and then your life is much more defined. There was that moment. And when people reminisce and they talk about what I did at school, you see their eyes light up. And what were just silly little schoolboy pranks, it's like they were the wildest person in the universe. Or, they talk about we when they say we or I. There's a feeling to the way they say it. They're back there and identifying. It's kind of, in those days of freedom. Before grown-up life got me and put me in a prison. It's a strange thing. Like I say, it's both amusing, because I did it myself, of course, and cringeworthy as well. It shows how limited our human life is, if those silly moments are some of the best memories we've got. Sorry to say it. So anyway, this feeling of me, and we did this and we did that. The feeling of me and I and we disappears. You're now in a quiet place. That was your story. Of course, you own it, but you don't identify with it anymore. Very, very, very important training for karma, because our karma is the same. Whatever we did in past lives, now we have to own it. It's our karma. We're getting the repercussions, but we are not the person we were when we made that karma. That's gone. It's gone. And just now we're about to go. We're at the end of this life. So we need to acknowledge it, work our way through it, forgive, thank, and then cut the string, finish that. We don't need to go back there ever again. Our mind needs to be released. So today, that is the main content. Now, it's all in this one of the 5 powers, which is called sowing positive seeds. The practice of generosity for the benefit of future lives, but mainly the inner practice of generosity, which is cutting off attachment on every level, as deep as we can go. So if at that time, if you know, for instance, the chut practice, and you can do it daily, even in a simplified form, which is cutting off on every level, very, very, very helpful. Now, what we're going to be doing all the way through our training, as I said, is Tonglen. So let's have a very simple introduction. It's not the form of Tonglen. Those of you who've been on Tonglen retreat with me, then you know we use a very profound form from the first Jamgon Control Rinpoche, where there's a Guru Yoga practice. So I'm not talking about that today. If you know that and you can do it, it's the best. It's the best. But Tonglen means, Tong means sending, Len means taking. We are taking to ourselves the suffering of our fellow beings and our own suffering. We are taking it into a place where it can be dealt with. A place of peace, a place of wisdom, a place of kindness, a place of acceptance, a place of love. We are willingly thinking, oh, if only I could, taking our own suffering. So maybe because you're getting closer to death, maybe you have all sorts of physical pains, you have life pains, you can't do what you want, you're not in places you'd like to be, you're not with people you'd like to be. Maybe you'd like to just die alone in the forest and curl up on a mossy bank and have little birds settle on your shoulders and fly away to another life, but there you are in a hospital with machines and it's very complicated. It may be painful in many ways. That's what we're dealing with the letting go. But whatever pain there is, we are accepting it and taking it to a place, our inner mind, our heart of Buddha, place of total kindness and love. And thinking, if only as I accept my own pain, I could be lifting the weight of pain from others, so that all those dying, like me just now, that they, even though they don't know what's going on, they'll never know, but somehow they feel a little lighter, a little less hurting, because their life is coming to an end. If only I could take that to myself. We do that when we breathe in. Maybe your breathing's not very good by this point. But anyway, we do that while we breathe in, and then we hold the breath. That's why I was saying that, as much as we can. Not to the point where your eyes are popping out your head and you're going to explode because you're holding your breath. But you don't just breathe out as soon as you breathed in. You breathe in, taking your suffering, and along with it, the suffering of some others, to yourself. Then as you hold your breath, you stay as best you can imagine, as best you can feel, in this place of inner beauty, where you are held by all the Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas, by whatever you take refuge in. That place is so pure, so big, so kind. There is no amount of suffering that can ever touch it. every suffering disappears in there. We say it's like a drop of water being dropped onto a block of white hot iron. Gone, gone forever. Whatever suffering there is, the great love of the universe of Buddha is so big. So we stay with that for a moment. And then from that place of peace, we breathe back into ourselves and those others who are also dying like we are. Healing. Peace. The power to let go. And then, as we come to next week's teachings, the power to accept the amazing opportunities for the mind to awaken that come after death. We're breathing into them wisdom. We're breathing into ourselves wisdom. We breathe in, we hold, we breathe out. So let's just do that for a few minutes together so that there's been at least a token formal introduction. You imagine now you are in your place of dying or the months before you die. Whatever pain you have, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, you take it in as though it's a dark black smoke. Because it's pain. Pain is pain. It hurts. You feel the hurt. You feel the hurt of the other people as vividly as you can. And you take it willingly as you breathe in. But as it comes to you, it can't survive. It comes into a place of such purity, it's gone. Then you hold your breath. You stay in that love, that timeless, perfect love and kindness. And then from there, you breathe into yourself and all the others, wisdom and joy and freedom. Thank you. So we're almost at the end of this, the teaching part of our session together today. To lead into next week, I'd like to just share a memory that came a lot to mind actually this morning and yesterday. And so Akon Rinpoche, my teacher, many of you knew him or knew of him. And in the last 20 years of his life, I suppose, especially the last 15, half of his year almost was spent in Tibet, where he evolved lots of humanitarian projects. At one point, over 100 projects. Each one was a class, a school, a clinic, an environmental project, monastery help, 100 different ones spread over a vast area. So he'd go for 5 months, at least, usually, and visiting so many destinations, often with not enough time. So he would sleep in a car overnight on unmade roads, 4x4 vehicle. He worked so hard, but he had so much to do. So it was my privilege, often in those years, to serve him, to prepare the trip in the 2 weeks or so before he left. So he was there in Samiling, being who he was. He always had people, especially people knowing he was off for 5-6 months, who need to come in with very, very big personal situations for advice. You have people from Dharma centers. What do we do? While you're away, will we do this? Will we do that? All sorts of things. So he'd be dealing with that very diligently, sleeping very little. But what I saw was that because he had this long time in Tibet that needed such careful preparation, because once you're there and traveling, what you don't have, you don't have. What you've not prepared, the papers and everything, you don't have. So his mind was already, even though those last couple of weeks we were there each day in the office, his mind was more and more already in Tibet in advance, preparing. He had to go there. Then somebody had asked him, can you give this envelope with a letter to so-and-so if you're in this place? He had so much to do. But nevertheless, he very methodically and very, very sincerely dealt with the stuff that was the Samiling European Dharma stuff. And it was the same thing when he came back. I used to go up to Samiling to help with the debriefing for a week or two. So next week, we'll be looking at where we're going, the actual time of dying, which is so different, and then what happens as you die, immediately after death, and then in between this life and the next life more generally, and then all the lives after that. How to prepare for that. How to prepare for that. So we need, in what we did today, we need to deal efficiently, mindfully, sincerely with stuff, with our emotional attachments to our loved ones, and with our whole identification with this life we've just led. But really, where our minds need to be going is the vast future ahead, and happily, not regretfully. The whole reason we do this work of letting go is so that we can leave without regret. Okay, so we've got 10-15 minutes now for discussion. Thank you. Put you all on screen and welcome anything. Oh, yes, we need to dedicate. It's better to do it now. So anything that was good in the spirit of the Tonglen, we share. Sonam die tamche zikpani, tomnenye pedranam pomchene, jeganache palap trukpaye sipe sole, drowa drwarasho, janchob semcho rinpoche, ma jepanam jejoche, jepanyampa me padam,